Hello there, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today I am going to answer a question from a gentleman who's written to me and asked for my advice on something. And in so doing, I think we can talk about how we complain about poor service, how a gentleman goes about dealing with the issue of a product which he has ordered, commissioned in this case, not coming back as one would expect, and how do you take forward that complaint with the people that you've been dealing with. Because sometimes, it can be a blow. You've ordered something very expensive, and when it finally arrives, it's a crushing disappointment. How do you take it forward from there? And I'll talk about how we would deal with that as we unfold the story which Daniel has written to me. Now I'm going to summarize the story because, as you can see, it is of quite some length, but in essence it's a sartorial matter, so you will enjoy this. Daniel tells us that he is a gentleman who doesn't reside in the UK. I'm going to sanitize it to avoid any embarrassment to anybody. But Daniel lives outside the UK and he enjoys dressing well. He has, up to this point, ordered a number of made-to-measure garments, but he reached that point in life where we all hope to get one day, and he got to a point where he was ready to commission his first ever bespoke suit. Now he wanted a three-piece suit, and he looked around at styles which he felt would be the best for him. And he approached a small tailoring house in Naples, in Italy. And he tells us here that the company is a small sartoria run by just two gentlemen tailors, who both initially gave the impression of being very nice and very professional. So he went ahead and commissioned this nice three-piece suit after some thought about what he wanted. Now, the relationship didn't start off great because in one of the, and that's not to say the relationship has soured, but the product which has been delivered didn't start off as one would expect, because Daniel tells us when he went for a fitting, he tried on the waistcoat and it wasn't at all as he would have expected. In fact, he said it revealed the bottom part of his stomach, a bit like, as he says here, a teenage girl and the t-shirts that they wear. So he asked them to recut it. He hasn't yet received that waistcoat because it wasn't given to him at the completion of the suit. So that is still outstanding. So he's unable to tell us whether that's been corrected to his requirements or not. However, when he received the suit, he tells us that he tried it on, and he sent us some images here so that we can share in his disappointment, in effect. The suit was a crushing disappointment. If you look at the jacket, he says he feels that it didn't fit very well, being somewhat shapeless, being rather boxy, not sort of drawing any accents to the natural waist. He's a very slim man, and it doesn't emphasize any of his finer qualities in that regard. And I would agree. Looking at these images, it does appear somewhat shapeless. But more than anything, and he's right to say here, the button, it's a single button fastening on this single-breasted jacket. You will note that the bottom is very high, much higher than one would expect a single fastening on a button on a jacket of this nature. It seems to be hovering over what it would expect the sternum of the wearer, with the rib cage ends, rather than at a natural point, between the navel and the sternum, which is where one would expect a button to look. And it just, for me, when I look at this, throws off the dimensions. It doesn't look right. And along with the shapeless design of the jacket, and I'm sorry to be brutal, to me this does not look like it is a bespoke garment at all. And if it was bespoke, it doesn't look like it was bespoke for this wearer. And as Daniel goes on to say here, he has had a number of made-to-measure jackets which fit far better than this so-called bespoke jacket. So, the situation we find ourselves in with Daniel, he's back in his home country, with 2 excellent fitting pairs of trousers, no issues with those, a waistcoat which has yet to arrive, and a jacket which he feels is a very poor fit indeed. And this here is his dilemma. In a perfect world, I would just tell them what I want and have the jacket redone. I would explain exactly what is wrong and ask them to remake it. Although, to be honest, at this point, I don't know whether I fully trust them on that regard. However, I feel I don't want to hurt their feelings. The tailor was so enthusiastic about their handiwork that they did on the jacket, and he proudly showed me the internal stitching that was done by hand. I just didn't have the heart to tell him, with all due respect, the internal stitching is rather meaningless, when he didn't take the time to ensure that the button stance was correctly situated and it doesn't flatter the wearer. I don't want to be rude. At the end of the day, I did walk out with that jacket, although I am completely dissatisfied with it. I don't know what to do. Do you think I should contact them about it? Do you think an artisan wants to receive criticism about a work which he feels proud about? Will it be rude of me to state the fact I dislike the final outcome after already walking away with it? If I do ask them to redo it, should I propose that they repay the cost, that I repay the cost of the material? Or maybe I should just forget it and treat it as an expensive lesson for the future. Okay, so Daniel, I'm going to talk about how one deals with a complaint in general, but I will flavour this towards your particular situation because I feel your pain, your disappointment. You've looked forward to a bespoke commission, probably for many decades, if you're in a position like me. You look forward to it. You think this is going to be that moment where you get exactly what you want, an exquisite fitting garment made by somebody just for you, exactly as you want it. And something like this, a situation arising of this nature, it just takes the wind out of your sails. You feel like your legs have been swept from under you. You've wasted what is presumably a lot of money, a bespoke garment. I mean, I can't speak for Naples, but it's going to be a few £1,000s. A bespoke garment like that in London would cost 6,000 or 7,000. So somewhere like, Naples, it's not going to be terribly far behind. I know it's going to be cheaper than London, but not terribly far behind. So what can you do? How would you approach that situation? And I'm going to talk about how I approach any complaint. And I've broken it down into a few steps. The first thing I would say is what you've done actually. Stay calm and assess the situation. Before you do anything, it's essential that we gather our thoughts and we take emotion away from our next steps. Because when you've just been disappointed by something, there's a bitterness, a bile which rises within you. And you want redress, don't you? You want to have this put right, particularly if it's been a long time in the coming. You've been looking forward to something and it is utterly devastating when it arrives. The first thing I would suggest you do is be clinical about this. Let us identify the issue clearly. Define where the product has fallen short of our expectations. If this means sitting down with a pen and paper and actually writing down your thoughts, that is what I would suggest you do. Is it just simply a case of being unsatisfied with the outcome? That's, yes it is, but we need to be a little bit more defined. Let's identify the certain areas in that commission where it has fallen short. In your case, it's not a defect, it's not something in the actual tailoring, it is in the design. And we need to identify the jacket doesn't appear to fit as anyone would expect a bespoke garment to fit. And the button placement is all out of kilter, I would suggest. It is several centimeters too high. It almost looks like the jacket has been made with a 2-button closure in mind and they've only fitted 1 button. Now, and even if they had done that, I still think the button would have been further south than it actually is. So think about it, identify the exact issues and define what the problem is. Then we gather the evidence. This is where we start to make a case of what we're going to put forward in our complaint. Now, making a case is taking photographs of it, perhaps in comparison to other good fitting garments in your collection that you would have expected this bespoke garment to fit better than those. We need to maybe say, go and speak to another bespoke tailor and say, look, what do you think of this? Or there might be a tailor or a seamstress in your local community who looks after you. Go to them and say to them, what is your opinion of the way this garment has been made for me? And then you can say, look, I have taken advice from others within the profession who have said, this jacket does not seem to fit me well. We have identified the problem, and we are now looking at situations to say, this is why I think this doesn't fit me well. It's not just saying, I don't like it. It is, this is the issue. It's fallen short of my expectation within these boundaries. And you've clearly provided evidence to suggest why you feel that is the way. You're not just airing a grievance, you are putting a case across to say why it's unsatisfactory. Now, the second step I suggest in dealing with a complaint in any situation, quite aside from this suiting situation, is really to prepare your complaint. Up to this point, we've thought about it, we've identified the complaints, we've started to gather evidence. Now we want to put it into a format that we can actually take to the people who have provided the service for us or the item for us in a cogent, responsible way so that we can place our case in front of them. Now, a little bit of time has passed now, so perhaps we're in the best place to start preparing our complaint because we have taken away the white hotness of our disappointment. We're not perhaps emotional anymore. Now we have clicked into a much more practical mindset, and this is the mindset we want to be in when we are actually preparing our complaint. So the first thing I would suggest we do is to be quite specific about what we feel this situation has fallen below our expectations. And in this instance, it's going to be the tailoring and the actual specifics about the tailoring that we've already talked about. Now, if it was another item, maybe it was the failure of something that we'd purchased, a physical item perhaps, we would identify the specific element which has gone wrong. Now, after we've done that, we also want to remain polite and respectful. Let us not forget that the people that we will be communicating with are the people who can help us with our problem. We do not want to be negative, emotional, and brusque with them, because ultimately being polite and respectful will likely foster a cooperative mindset in getting our problem resolved, and that is where we want to be. The next thing we want to do, besides being respectful and being specific, is to suggest a solution to this problem. It's all very well coming with problems, but the very best problem solutions actually come from the person who is suffering redress. We will say, this is what I would like done to correct this issue. That's what it's all about, really. We are telling them, you've fallen short, but this is what I would like you to do to make the situation better. You've already started thinking like that in your letter. You have said, should I perhaps offer to pay for the material if they recut it in the style that I would prefer? You're starting to make compromises, which may be the overall solution in the long run. It may be you're looking for a refund or an exchange of the item, but think about how you would feel better. In your letter, you have said, I don't even know if I want to do this with them because they've lost credibility with me. If that's the case, tell them that. As long as you're being reasonable and without sort of aggression, and be willing to work with them towards a mutually beneficial solution, there's every likelihood they will come on board and they will work with you towards that solution to the problem. But the key word to remember is reasonable. Nobody is going to help somebody who comes into the shop or communicates with them on the phone or via an email who's banging their fist and shouting and screaming. Believe me, that gets your neck up and no good will come of it. So reasonableness is the key from the beginning. Now, my third little step for you in dealing with a complaint of any kind is really really in just how we initiate contact with the service provider that we are taking issue with. And how I would begin that is researching who is the right person that I need to speak to. Don't just ring up the general telephone line for the company and start shouting at the first person who answers the phone. Make sure you've identified who you want to air your grievance with and try and get in touch with them directly. All right? And there's a number of different ways you can engage, and I'll talk about them individually. Firstly, the obvious one is the telephone call. Now, speaking directly with somebody who has the power to resolve your problem is the most likely and best outcome that you're going to get. All right? Because a lot is lost in other forms of communication, such as writing to somebody and so on, that you can't convey in a conversation. The tone of your voice, the manner in which you speak, the respectfulness. Lots of things come out in a voice which cannot be delivered to the person you're talking to in any other way. So my suggestion, if you can, make it a telephone call at the first point when you're raising that complaint. Now, when you're on the phone, when you're about to have this conversation, I would plan in advance. I would have my complaint script in front of me. I would have the points that we've talked about. We've talked about preparing your complaint, gathering your evidence, having the things that you would like as a resolution all in front of you, so that in the heat of the moment, you don't fly off on a tangent and you miss something. So in essence, prepare a telephone script. It's there in front of you. Have a pen, tick them off as you go through them. Make sure you're not going to lose your track and forget to say something. And never forget to make sure you've taken all of the details of the person that you're talking to and keep a contemporaneous note of any points that you raise together. So if they say, okay, I offer to do this or that, if the person you're talking to is making these offers, write them down and confirm them at the end of the call. Okay, right, thank you for speaking to me today. If I can just clarify, earlier on you said you are going to do this for me. Did I get that right? Yes. Okay, we've clarified it, we're certain. We know when we discontinue the call exactly what's going to happen next. Ask them as well, is this call being recorded? If it is, you know they've got an accurate record of it as well. If they haven't, say to them, look, we've had this conversation, I've recorded some notes as we go along, I'm going to drop these back to you in an email. If you can just confirm this is what you're going to do. We are building evidence, a case to show they've agreed to help us. If they don't, at a later point, we might have to take it to a higher level of redress. But these things are what I would do when I'm having a telephone conversation. Now, if we're not using the telephone, we're going to be using an email, right? Generally in the modern world. I don't think we're writing physical letters anymore. You can never guarantee it's going to get there if you did, but an email, pretty strong chance. Now, if you prefer written communication, because you don't think you could keep your nerves in control or your temper when you're speaking to them because you're that disappointed, that's fine. Just make sure you don't omit anything that we've talked about. You do an initial rough draft, get those things together, and then put them in a nicely prepared email. Good grammar, make it look professional. It makes a difference. And of course, the beauty of writing an email is you've got an evidential trail that you have sent them an email, at what time. You can put a read receipt on it. You can say, okay, I can see somebody opened this email at this time on this date. Can you tell me what's happening now? Good for evidential purposes, not quite so good when it comes to the human communication, which is key in getting a situation resolved. The other route you can take is in person, of course. Now, if this is a provider who is near to where you live and it's feasible for you to pop in, well, it's probably the best method of all. Because if you do that, all of the benefits which come from a phone call can be demonstrated in human experience. You can show them how unhappy you are. You can point to the things that you're disappointed with. You can demonstrate how it doesn't fit. However, it may not be possible. The only thing I would say, maintain your composure. And if you are going in person, take in those notes with you again so that you don't forget anything. Don't rely on your memory. Memory is fallible when you get excited, disappointed, or emotional. So take your notes so you don't forget anything. My fourth tip for you in getting the redress to your complaint is make sure you follow up on that call that in-person visit or that email. After a reasonable amount of time, contact them again and ask them, did you receive my communication? Can you tell me what's happening? If you don't get any response, try going higher up the ladder within the company. And that is really what my fifth tip for you is. It's about escalation. Now, if you don't get that response in a reasonable time, or the response isn't what you expect, ask to speak to somebody in a management position who is able to take that position, that situation, under control. You've always got social media. You can air your problem more widely. That might focus their attention if you do that, and tell them that you're doing that because you haven't had the response that you've sought. And if that doesn't work, external help. It depends where you live in the world, what government agencies there are for consumer protection rights. But that's a last resort. We're unlikely to get a resolution genuinely if we have to go to that point. But I would say that's what I would do. And finally, reflection and learning is what comes as the final step in my complaints process. Because once it's been resolved, and hopefully it has been to your satisfaction, I would reflect on what's happening. What went well? What did I do in this complaints process which worked very well for me? Was it going in person? Was it the phone call, the telephone script, the gathering evidence? How did it really come together? Why was it successful? And when you've reflected on it, remember to do it next time, because life is a series of complaints, and if you're well prepared and well armed for them, they're going to work out better for you. So think of it like that. I always think afterwards, I've been through a situation like that, if this happened again, what would I do differently this time? How could I make it that much better? So, if we're going to round up for Daniel, some of the points which you raised, which I didn't answer there, is, do you think you should contact them? Do you think an artisan wants to receive criticism about work that he feels really proud about? Well, to be honest, Daniel, at this stage, all right, if I was you, I wouldn't care about what this guy felt. You are the customer, sir. You have parted with a large sum of money, presumably, for an item which falls below your expectation, and which I would say would fall below the expectation of anybody seeking a bespoke commission for a suit. It's not a difficult ask, and if these are really good tailors, as you say, they should have been able to provide you something better than they have. So bringing to their attention their failure should not for one moment cause them professional embarrassment. They should in fact be apologizing to you. Don't worry about the fact that you've walked away. You can say to them, look, in the heat of the moment, it seemed all right, but now I've tried it on, I've showed it to other people, I've asked for advice from maybe a tailor as well, and they agree. It doesn't fit me. I would like this corrected, please. I am not satisfied with the end result. Now, there is nothing in the world wrong with saying that. Let's be honest, and let's put our cards on the table. You're probably never going to go back to them again, all right? So they're not worried about losing business from you. You're not coming back. What they're likely to be worried about, or they should be worried about, is reputational damage by you not having what is expected in such a situation. And if I was them, I would bend over backwards to make sure that the service they provide you is up to the required standard, which it is not at this stage. So don't feel any compunction at all about going back to them, raising this issue with them. What happens after that, the ball is in their court. But if you use some of the steps that I've suggested today, we are much more likely to get the outcome which you seek, which is ultimately just what you paid for, a bespoke suit that fits you perfectly, which at the moment you do not have. So good luck with that, Daniel. Let us know how you get on. I'd be delighted to hear and pass on to the folks in the future. I hope you've enjoyed this video on how a gentleman deals with a complaint. If you have, thumbs up, subscribe for more, support the channel by leaving me a comment, dropping me a question, just like Daniel did, via an email. You can buy me a coffee or even become a patron. I make extra videos for my patrons, which I think you'd enjoy. So until the next time, take care, and I'll see you again very soon.